Hey, what's going on, guys? The Bearded Baron here, bringing you guys another Dead by Daylight video. Now, today's video is going to be a discussion video about the recent change that behavior has done to Moris. No longer are the days when you can one-hook Mori people, and a lot of folks are thinking that keys are going the way of the dodo as well. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Moris and keys and the health of the game overall and where we see it moving in the future. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so first, to understand the distinction and the problem between having keys versus having a Moris in a match and the reasons for why they change, let's take a look at first at what each of the items actually brings into the match. Now, first up, with the keys. Now, a key allows the survivors to be able to escape the match once the certain amount of generators are completed. It allows the survivors to reopen the hatch once the killer closes it, and as a byproduct, you can also put on add-ons to reveal the killer and survivor's auras. Now, the survivors still have to finish generators. This is not something like the hatch does not spawn at the beginning of the match for the survivors to be able to escape. This is simply something once the survivors have finished enough generators, they're going to be able to unlock the hatch, or the hatch will spawn, and then they can open it, be able to leave the match. All right, so taking a look at the Moris now. So Moris, at its bare bone basics, allows the killer to kill a survivor after they've been hooked one time. Now, obviously this has been nerfed, but I'm talking about the reasons as to why it was. So you could kill a survivor after you'd hooked them for the first time. Now, the beauty and the problem with this is that killers could find a survivor quickly within the first 10-15 seconds, down them quickly, maybe in another 10-15 seconds after that. So 30 seconds into the match, somebody's already been hooked. Survivor comes along and they unhook them. Maybe another 15-20 seconds goes by, depending on how toxic or how aggressive the killer wants to play it, and you could have somebody dead within the first minute of the match. This is detrimental to survivors because it automatically lends to the killer being having much more advantage here, because there's only 3 survivors now on the map versus 4. You know, that additional survivor can't help out with generators, can't unhook, can't do totems, can't do anything because now that they're dead. Not only that, but that survivor, whoever played that, is guaranteed to have depipped from the match because they weren't able to get any kind of points during the match gameplay to be able to move forward. So that's an additional problem as well. Now let's take a look at countering each one of these. Now, for a killer, countering keys, he has several different options. One, the killer could bring in Franklin's, and given enough time passes, if the killer knocks that key out of their hand, it will now be removed completely from the match. Secondly, the killer could just kill all of the players before the hatch spawns. Even if a team does bring in a key, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get the hatch. If the killer knows what they're doing and they can optimize properly, they could kill all the survivors before the survivors have a chance to even be able to use the key. And lastly, the killer could just kill the key holder. Now, this obviously doesn't apply with a lot of Swift groups, especially if they're on comms together. But if you got a solo queue that's running in that just decided to bring in a key, a lot of times you can just kill that one particular person, and the other teammates won't be able to find the key or even know that that survivor had a key until the match ends. So now, adversely, let's take a look at countering for Moris. Now, the only thing that I can think of that would counter a Mori is if whether or not you could gen rush during the match. Being able to knock out the gens as quickly as possible, so that way it gives the killer as little time as possible to be able to kill people, definitely is the way to go. But a lot of times that only works with highly optimized Survive with Friends groups. Or if you perhaps get very, very lucky with a group where every single survivor knows how to loop the killer and can loop them well for long enough, and everybody else is working on generators. There's a lot that has to go into play for a team to completely shut down a killer, especially one that brings in a Mori, because like I said, as soon as the killer gets one Mori, that drastically changes the makeup of the game moving forward, and it's just kind of a domino snowball effect after that for the killer to be able to get that at least 3 Ks, if not 4, depending on the hatch. All right, now that we've taken a look at what keys can do and what Moris can do and how to counter them, now we can start to see as to why behavior went ahead and has nerfed them. So now the current state of what it is at the making of this video is that a killer would have to hook a survivor twice to be able to Mori them. Now, a lot of killers, including when I look at this myself, some of the animations for these Moris are considerably slower than if the killer just decided to pick up the survivor, take them over to the hook, and put them on the hook for the third hook. So I don't think we're going to see very many Moris moving on into the future, but I think that Moris were brought into the game a few years ago to combat Survive with Friends because there were infinite spots, because there were very safe pallets. Now the behavior has gone through and scrubbed through a lot of the game, removing those infinites, removing all of those safe pallets. I don't think that Moris are necessarily needed anymore. Now with the Mori changed, a lot of killer mains are saying that keys need to follow suit. If one removes out Moris, one needs to also remove out keys. So I wanted to dive in a little bit to see why killer mains or killers in general feel as though that keys are overpowered. So for one, the killer can feel cheated because the survivor's still able to escape the match even though the killer played extremely well. You might be well on your way, playing fair, everybody's gotten 2 and 3 hooks, you're on your last survivor, you've closed the hatch, and they happen to have a key and they're able to escape. There's nothing more frustrating than that, especially when you've played at your best and you feel like you got cheated there at the very end. Secondly, if the survivor gauges why the killer is going for an adept achievement, aka they're only bringing in that killer's native perks, the killer won't get that regardless. I'm not sure if behavior has any intention on fixing this in the future, but getting killer adepts is way easier to do at rank 20 than it is at red ranks, where a lot of killers end up, especially if you main killer. It's very difficult even on its own to get it, let alone if a survivor brings in a key and is able to escape the match. Third thing it does is it bypasses core mechanics of the gameplay that would otherwise have to be played. What I mean by this is that when you finish all of the generators, now the killer at least has that last ditch effort to be able to make a play with the exegates. Maybe the killer has Blood Warden, maybe the killer has Noed, maybe the killer has something late game, in game, to be able to use against the survivors to try to secure that 4K. Now with a key, everybody finds the hatch and everybody can escape, and now that killer is just left holding the bag with no reward in sight. So now why is it that behavior after all of these years has finally decided to rework Moris to nerf them from being one hooks to now being the last hook kind of offering? Well, I think that this started primarily with Pyramid Head. When Pyramid Head was released originally, he came in with a built-in third hook Mori that he could use depending on if the survivors walked through the barbed wire or not. So that kind of led people into thinking about what if all of the killers had that ability. I think that Moris in general are going to be removed out fully, and I think that killers are just going to have the ability to just straight up kill survivors as at their third hook. I think that that's where behavior is going with it eventually, so that way killers don't even have to bring in the Mori, because now you can't kill them early. So bringing in a Mori might not be as advantageous nearly as much as what it was before. Keys, on the other hand, keys, there might be a slight rework to those as well. I would like to see where behavior, maybe with the keys, left the keys in place, but keys can only be used to reopen the hatch after the killer has closed them. So if it's a 1v1 kind of scenario, if the killer closes that hatch, now the survivor is able to reopen up the hatch with those keys, rather than getting rid of them completely, because I do like the idea of keys kind of coming in for a outplay ability. But moving forward, I think the behavior is doing a really great job for as far as getting rid of all of these old mechanics, these old game mechanics that no longer are applicable in today's game. Another example of this is bloodlust. Bloodlust was an issue, or it still is right now, but it's definitely on the mindset of behavior. They did an experiment to see what would happen if they removed bloodlust from the game. Bloodlust was brought in to combat those extremely safe pallets and those infinite loops. If you no longer have the infinite loops or those strong pallets, then the killer should not need those in order to be able to down a survivor. If the survivor plays a loot very, very well, the survivor should be rewarded for that. If a killer plays that tile very, very well, then the killer should be rewarded, and vice versa. But moving forward, I think that behavior has the game's interest in the best interest for them and for the community itself. I know that I harp on them quite a lot, especially when it comes out to putting out bugs into the code. I don't even want to get started there, but I think that for as far as game design, trying to keep things balanced, trying to keep things on an even kilter would be really, really great. I would love, as somebody who both plays killer and survivor, would love to see a scenario where Survive with Friends perhaps took a slight decrease in the time that they're allowed to do things. For example, if a 4-man Swift has a 20% reduction rate to everything across the board, working on generators, working on healing other people, unhooking people, working on totems, just across the board, a debuff for that. It's not too much to completely break Survive with Friends, but at the same time, it allows the killers a little bit more time to be able to combat these folks that are being able to communicate, being able to coordinate with one another. And I think that would be a great addition to bring into the game. But guys, that's going to be it for me for today. What are your guys' opinions on Moris and or on keys? What do you think about it for the future of the game? I'd really like to know. But guys, and if you haven't already, hit that follow button, hit that subscription icon. That way you guys know when I make more videos for you. But I'll see everybody in the fog, and everybody have a wonderful, wonderful evening.